You want to put on muscle as much as possible, but you're not sure how to go about the diet to make that happen. Does Maingaining work, or should you bulk and cut? Well, the answer is yes. And when it comes to bulking, I used to think that bulking is simply laziness. It's just an excuse to eat as much as you want and get fat and not actually look like you work out. And you can just say, well, you know, I'm bulking. If you don't look like you actually go to the gym ever. Because you're so large, you have a high body fat percentage. But, I mean, unfortunately, that's true for a lot of people. They go about bulking the wrong way. It's just, I'm just gonna start eating and eating whatever I want now, not even tracking your protein or calories or anything, just eating a bunch until you finally look in the mirror one day and be like, oh wow, I got fat, I need to go on a cut. And then you go in an extreme cut and probably lose a lot of the muscle that you may have gained in that process. So how should you go about this? I think it's a two-step process based on my own personal experience, what I've had happen over the last 5 years. So starting out as a newbie, I think Maingaining is the way to go. Now just to clarify what that means, it's a term Greg Doucette coined, Maingaining, which means you maintain the same body fat percentage while slowly gaining muscle. So your weight slowly increases over time and you look relatively the same because you stay at the same relative body fat percentage. Now, it can be confusing because that's how he initially explained it with one of his first videos, but he's gone back and forth between saying that, recomping, and various other stuff that he interchangeably uses the term Maingain for. But that's the way I'm going with. You're maintaining the same relative body fat percentage while slowly gaining weight. And when you're doing that, you're pretty much eating close to maintenance. What I did was essentially eat at maintenance. What I figured out what my maintenance calories were to stay at the same weight, and every few months I'd bump it up 100 calories a day. And then I'd gain a tiny bit of weight over a few months, and then when I kind of plateaued and just stayed there for another month, bump it up another 100 calories. I went from like 158, 160 pounds eating around 2,100 calories a day. Now I'm at like 190, eating 3,000 calories a day. So you slowly get bigger and you can slowly eat more and more over time without getting fat, without just bulking and looking in the mirror one day and be like, oh wow, I went too far. And I did this for about my first 3 years, and I gained 20 pounds of muscle in that time without looking much difference, probably staying within the same relative 2% body fat range. And I mean, that's what, at my weight, 180, 170 at the time, you're looking at 3.5 to 4 pounds essentially of wiggle room of, you know, 2% body fat range. So you may go up and down a little bit with the body fat, but you're not putting on a substantial amount where you really notice it very much. Because going from like 11 to 13% body fat isn't going to be as noticeable of a difference as if you go from 8 to 10. And the higher your body fat percentage goes, it's gonna be harder to tell those couple extra pounds. But then your rate of growth will start to slow because you have those newbie gains. You know, first off, I said, I'm slowly bumping up those calories. Maybe your first year, you could put on 10 to 12 pounds of muscle naturally. We're talking naturally here, not taking any kind of special supplements that aren't legal, steroids, SARMs, those types of things. We're just talking about, you know, using creatine. Really, you don't even need any supplements when you start out. I didn't start taking creatine or pre-workouts until I was in my 30s. But your first year, say you gain 12 pounds. The next year, you're probably not gonna gain that much again. It's gonna slow down. Your body, when you stimulate it to growth, it grows a lot at the beginning. If you're training hard, consistently, tracking your progress, making sure you're overloading, and eating enough protein, a gram per pound of body weight every day is what I shoot for. And if you're getting that in, you can grow a lot. I put on like probably close to 12 pounds that first year. It was pretty noticeable. But then the next year may have only been like 7. The next year maybe only 5. So the longer you go, the slower that's gonna happen as you get closer and closer to your genetic limit. And if you push hard, you train right, you eat right, you're gonna get closer to that than if you're just kind of going through the motions, putting on a little bit of muscle, not really tracking your diet, because you can do all the training you want, but if you don't have enough protein, your body's not gonna be able to build up the muscle that you're wanting to get. Close to 1 pound per month when I first started, and now the last year that I did it, once I got into that third year, closer to maybe 1/2 pound a month at the most, that I could be gaining in muscle. So once you start getting that, and now I might be in the like 3 to 5 range of pounds of muscle I could put on per year, which doesn't really sound like a whole lot, especially when you see guys on social media putting on 20 pounds of muscle, or Thor like putting on, I think he wants to put on 40 pounds of muscle for his role in like 5 months. That's totally unrealistic. I'll card that video if you want to see it. But you see those things and you think, oh man, 5 pounds of muscle, I'm not making any progress. But go get 5 pounds of lean chicken or lean beef or something and see how much volume of meat that actually is you're adding to your body. You're not gonna notice it from day to day because you see yourself in the mirror every day, but if you take pictures now, take them again 6 months in a year, it's pretty surprising how much those few pounds can actually gain, especially if you're not gaining a whole lot of body fat in the process. It's gonna show even more. But as you get into those lower 3 to 5 pound per year of muscle gain numbers, it's a lot harder to gauge your progress, because if you're putting on a quarter a pound of muscle per month, maybe half a pound, and you're staying within the same body fat, especially if you're on the lower end of the body fat, it's hard to tell if you are making progress, even with those pictures. And what I found for me over the last 2 years, kind of year 4 and 5 of training hard for me, I stopped the just Maingaining approach and I started doing what I call like kind of the bulk and recomp, or bulk and mini cut, depending on how you want to look at it. But essentially, because I found out that I like to be around 10%, 10 to 12% body fat's like where I feel good. I've got a good combination of I look lean, but also big enough to where I fill out my shirts. I don't look like a string bean. I start getting under 10%. I start feeling bad. I'm having to watch my diet like crazy, and I'm definitely not making any progress in the gym. Like, I feel weaker. I don't really feel like I can push. I'm probably more likely to get injured. At 10%, 10-ish, I could maintain that. Maybe I could build a little bit of muscle, but it's kind of hard to track it if I'm staying at that body fat percentage. So what I do is bulk slowly. And this is where people make the mistake. They just start bulking, no clear cut end in mind. They're just gonna go until all of a sudden they look fat in the mirror, and then they do a steep cut. And you're probably erasing what you've done. And the argument for not doing a bulk and cut that I hear from Greg Doucette all the time is, this makes sense logically. Say you're Maingaining, you're slowly gonna put on 6 pounds of muscle over the year. So ideally, you start out at 180 pounds and you're slowly adding, what, a pound every other month, and you don't really notice any change in body fat, and you end up at the end of the year 186, slowly putting on that muscle. Someone else might be like, I'm gonna bulk 20 pounds. They bulk all the way up to 200 over 20 pounds in, let's say, 5 months. That's a lot to gain. That's a pretty substantial amount. You're gonna gain a lot of body fat in that process. You may gain even more muscle. Say you gain 8 to 9 pounds of muscle and your strength goes up like crazy. It's awesome. But then you're like, oh man, I gained too much. I need to cut. Well, now to get to that same point of being at 186 pounds at the end of the year, you need to cut 15 pounds. So that's a long diet. And a lot of people don't want to do a slow diet. So what do? 1,000 calorie deficit, cut really fast. You're cutting 2 pounds a week. You're trying to get this done in 6 to 8 weeks. And when you're in that steep of a deficit for that long, you're not going to be making progress. So all the progress that you think you're going to be making, now you're cutting for 2 to 3 of those months, probably not making progress because you're so weak, and you could possibly be losing muscle in that process. So that at the end of the year, you end up at 186 pounds, pretty much the same as the guy who Maingained. So it seems like it would make sense, but what I found is when you're in those smaller numbers of 3 to 5 pounds of muscle you could put on, what works for me is I'm going to slowly bulk 8 to 10 pounds at the most, because I know I can't put on 10 pounds of muscle in a year anymore. So if I could put on 6, then that's another 4 pounds of fat that I'd be adding on top of that if I could get 6 pounds of muscle in a shorter amount of time by doing that slow bulk. I'm talking like the same 2 pounds a month at the most. That would be like a lean bulk. So 10 pounds, that would take 5 months. So you can get really good training during that time. I found for me, just eating in a caloric surplus really boosts my training. I feel strong constantly. I can keep going in, pushing harder and harder until I really feel fatigued. Take a deload week, start over, and keep going with it. And you could do like 3 6-week cycles, not steroids, but mesocycles in that with some deloads, and be pushing really hard. And then you end up 10 pounds heavier, right? So that's at the most 2 to 2.5% body fat above where I started. So that's hardly noticeable. I mean, maybe some veins don't show as much, but really, who's gonna see you much with your shirt off anyways? I mean, you're gonna fill out your shirts more, you still have some veins showing. Like right now, I'm at 190, probably 186 is where my ideal look would be right now. So what happens then? Go straight into a cut? No, I don't go into a cut. What I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna maintain that new weight for another like 2 to 3 months. And I'm gonna keep training hard, because now what happens, as opposed to when I'm say 10% body fat, and I'm trying to train hard, I'm trying to push, if I'm not eating just the right amount, then I'm gonna have bad workouts. If I don't get enough carbs before a workout, maybe I didn't eat as much the day before. I noticed this a lot when I got really lean, was if If I didn't eat a bunch the day before I did chest especially, my workout would really suffer. If I went into that day on a caloric deficit from the day before, when I'm just trying to maintain, maybe I just didn't eat as much that day, didn't have as big an appetite, it hurts the next day's workout. But with this, now that we're a few pounds above that, a few body fat percentage higher, now I know I have a little extra in there, a little bit of extra body fat to play with. So maybe if I don't eat quite as much food the day before, well, I'm not like on the verge of starting to go catabolic, going under 10% body fat where I'm not gonna make progress. So I've noticed it doesn't really affect me like it does when I'm just 3 to 4 pounds leaner. And so I continue at that new weight for those 2 to 3 months, and then can reevaluate. Maybe you gain another pound of muscle in that time, and then you can decide, well, do I wanna cut now? Let's say we said 5, we're at 8 months now. You can say, okay, do I want to cut? You can cut down a 3 to 4 week cut at the most to cut those 3 to 4 pounds off if you don't like the way you look at this point. And then that is really easy, 3-week, 500 calorie per day deficit you can do, not even notice it, not even really get hungry. You get back to that ideal body fat percentage that you like, and now you're stronger. You weren't wondering like, am I eating enough to make sure I'm building muscle? Am I going kind of a couple steps forward and back and forth? You're just going up, staying here, then cut back a little bit. I'm not into like doing a big bulk and do a little mini cut, do another big bulk. Unless you're taking drugs, you're not gonna be gaining muscle super fast once you're past that 3 to 4 year mark. And the nice thing about that timeline is, say you wanna look good when you're going to the beach, enjoying your summer, going out to the lake, the boats, you're gonna be in swimsuits and whatnot. You can plan it so that your cut ends around the beginning of May, and then you can just maintain that 10 to 12% body fat range that you like while you look good. You could go more into a maintenance volume. Say you're working out 6 days a week, you go to 4 days a week doing an upper lower split instead of a push-pull leg split. So you can work out less, throw in some cardio on the other days. You can maintain that strength throughout the whole summer. And then when you get to September, October, go back into your slow bulk, and you bulk from September, October, November, December, January. So you bulk to January, February, maintain that through April, do your 3 to 4 week cut, and you're right back to where you want to be, but now you're 5 pounds heavier the next year. And you slowly do that each year. And then you're gonna look good. You know your training's going well, you know you can push hard, and you're gonna look the way you want pretty much close to all the time. You're never gonna get to a, oh, I look fat state in your bulk. You're just gonna be strong, you're gonna feel good, your hormone levels are gonna be normal, you cut back a little bit, and you're good to go. And that pretty much always keeps you, no matter what happens, even if you get to the top of your bulk and say, someone's like, hey, I wanna do a photo shoot. Like, I've got a company that wants me to do a photo shoot with some of the equipment I did for a Christmas shoot. I'm only 2 weeks away from cutting back some if I felt like I needed to be around the weight I wanted to look a little bit more shredded for a photo shoot to make the product look better, if that's something you're into. Whatever reason, you got a wedding or something comes up, someone invited you to the beach, simple thing to plan for, not a big deal. But let me know what you think, what your techniques are. Hit that like button, comment with any questions you have, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see y'all in the next one.